police protective custody. And we have yet another member of our legal staff coming forward.
And I'm with the legal department. I have Mary Pollock here, who is the director of the Juvenile Intake and Assessment Center, and we also have Sheriff Ash here. We're here to give you a little bit of information about children in police protective custody. I just have a very brief PowerPoint to explain the situation that we found ourselves in and the policy that the sheriff has adopted. Ms. Pollock is here to answer any questions that you may have about the placement of children in protective homes. So this situation comes up when we have children who the police have taken into police protective custody. There can be a window of 3 business days before children who are taken into custody for their own protection see a judge and receive a longer-term placement. So those children are taken to the Juvenile Intake and Assessment Center, which is located in the Sheriff's Department, and Ms. Pollock has to find a place for those children to spend that time period. And that's 3 business days. That means that it could be 5 days if there's a weekend in there, could be 6 days if there's a holiday. So we're talking about children who are ages 0 to 18. There is no state funding or support for this time period for the care of these children. This is something that our community takes care of itself. We're talking about children who come through JIAC, the Juvenile Intake and Assessment Center, range from infants who have been immediately removed upon birth and placed in protective custody to juvenile offenders. Obviously, juvenile offenders are a different population from the kids that we're talking about here. So here are a couple pictures of the Juvenile Intake and Assessment Center. We have a little kiddo there hanging out with one of the Sheriff's Department detectives. So this is where the children are taken by law enforcement. Ms. Pollock provided these statistics. You're probably all familiar with Roberts Place. I definitely don't want to give the impression that we're not using Roberts Place. We love Roberts Place. We have placed 227 children there. Roberts Place is licensed for children ages 3 to 18, and a lot of times it's a great place for teenagers, but not appropriate for the little tiny kids. So protective homes are fantastic for our little tiny kids or teens who just aren't quite appropriate to place at Roberts Place. So protective homes are community volunteers. They may be through a private organization. Before this policy, we used the Global Orphans Project, which was a faith-based organization that organized protective homes where we could place these children. Global Orphans Project is still part of our group of resources. Unfortunately, they limit protective homes to members of certain churches. And we want anybody in our community who is an appropriate placement to be able to volunteer to do this. So we developed a new policy that allows us to run the program in-house, which gets us around that faith-based requirement. The policy includes a background check for obviously a criminal history background check, but also a child abuse registry background check, a home walkthrough, training, which Juvenile Intake and Assessment will be developing, and requirements that the responsible adults in the home report any violation of background check, walkthrough, anything like that. So we just came here to share the good work that Juvenile Intake and Assessment is doing, and also just to inform our elected officials in our community about this community need and the fact that we have some very altruistic community members who are stepping up to the plate and taking care of kids. Do you have any questions?
Yes, is the only update that you're removing the faith-based requirement?
The update is that instead of relying 100% on Global Orphans to identify the homes, train them, do the background checks, we are running a parallel program in-house where we identify the homes and do the background checks and all that.
Both.
Yes.
Do you currently need more volunteers?
Yes.
So someone who would be willing, then Mary could call you at this number?
Yes, what we're going to do is pick a couple of dates and put some training curriculum together, and then we'll schedule a time for everybody to come in, hopefully in a group, and do like maybe a 2 to 3 hour training and be done. We're going to ask KVC to do the walkthroughs since they're
Perfect.
experts on that.
Right.
And then we've got other, little things that we'll have to work out. But yeah, I mean, if they can pass the background checks and everything, we desperately need them.
Could we just go back a slide or two where you showed us the pie chart? In a year's time, 291 kids needed this.
Yes.
Yes.
And, yeah, great. That's a lot of kids. I mean, I'm glad, like you said, that Robert's Place can manage the bulk of them, but you still have that gap that you're needing.
Well, and if we have several teenage children at Robert's Place and we get a 6-year-old in, we're going to try and put the 6-year-old in a protective home rather than over there with a bunch of teenagers.
Okay. Yes.
So can you talk about your trends? So if you're talking about basically one per day right now, that would come out to obviously close to 350, 375 children. How is that trending year to year? Are we taking in more now, less? Where are we in that scope?
It stays about status quo. We really don't see much fluctuation. I will say about 2 months ago, I believe it was May, we had 40 in 1 week.
Wow.
No, I'm sorry. We had 17 in 1 week. We had 40 for the whole month. So it's desperately needed. We've got some great protective homes through the Global Orphan Project. Unfortunately, we've lost some great protective homes because they don't go to a church that's affiliated with the project. So we're really anxious to see what we can do with, our people in our community.
Thank you.
And when you talk about bringing this in-house, is there a dollar number attached to bringing it in-house, the portion that we are?
No. Robert's House and foster homes get reimbursement by the state for the kids that they take in as protective custody. The protective homes, it's strictly voluntary. There's no money involved. Now, as JIAC, we try to send about 3 days worth of clothing with the kids. If the parents won't bring clothes up, or if the home wasn't clean enough to warrant having some clothes brought up, then I've got funding in my grant that pays for clothing and hygiene products and shoes, all that.
My final question is, do you have a backlog by any chance, or are there times that you do have backlogs during the year?
Meaning, like we have kids sleeping in the office?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Basically.
We do. Typically, traditionally, our kids that are sleeping in the office are ones that have been placed at Robert's Place before, and they've ran, and so Robert's Place doesn't want them to come back. So we try to find a foster home or a protective home, but 14, 15, 16-year-old male, it's hard to find placement for. So we've had them live in JIAC. We've had little ones that have had to stay there because it was late at night and we couldn't find placement.
Commissioner Philbrook.
So for those youth that can't go back to Robert's Place for whatever, and I'm sure there are reasons why, what type of care are we asking for those kiddos? What are we looking at?
For the ones,
That
older ones that have run from Robert's Place?
I mean, what type, because I'm just saying, well, what kind of facility do you have to have for that?
Just a home. I mean, we can't restrain. You can't lock them in. They can't be in a secure facility. It has to be staff secured, meaning they can yell at you, please don't run.
Well, I'm just asking because I think there's people out there that need to know as well as I
Absolutely,
that there are restraints, but not that kind of restraints.
absolutely,
You can't lock them in the place and so you
absolutely.
can't go out the door.
They're not offenders. They're children in need of care, so that's a whole different set of rules.
Right, thank you.
Other questions? Mr. Criswell?
Yeah, just a thought. Can we, I know you guys are developing some marketing materials to try to get the community to participate. Can we get that and run it through our HR volunteer program? We have a volunteer coordinator, so as many hands, I think, as can touch what we're trying to do might get us a larger number. Just a thought.
The only concern I would have is that if several different departments know who the protective homes are, then that kind of loses the credibility of it being protected.
Well, but we use non-UG employees for some of our volunteer stuff. I wasn't thinking of departments as much as our volunteer services coordinator in HR. We have, so it wouldn't be department heads, it would be regular citizens who volunteer.
Just notifying them of the program, absolutely.
okay.
Absolutely.
Well, that's just another thought. All right, thanks.
Well, thank you both for bringing the information. It is an information-only item, and we do appreciate the update and also just taking that on. Thank you. Next item for us is a stormwater rate transition analysis presentation. And we have Mr. Jeff Fisher here with folks that I'll let you introduce, and when you are ready, you can take it away.
Okay, thank you and good evening. You may be familiar with Sarah White, who's our green infrastructure engineer. She'll be the staff project manager, and then Anna White, to her right, is with Black and Veatch. She'll be the project manager and subject matter expert. We have two important objectives over the next couple of years regarding stormwater. One is master plan, and then the other is the fee analysis. They're going to be running in parallel. The stormwater master plan is just getting ready to kick off, so we have limited information, but it'll, at a high level, evaluate the system, how it's handling things, known issues that are reoccurring. A few of them we're all very familiar with, and then come to some conclusions on those. Kind of a rough scope for those kinds of projects, big and small. The fee analysis is then going to use that information to determine revenues needed, right? We chose Black and Veatch primarily because they're qualified, of course. They're under contract, and they've been working with BPU on similar analyses, so it made sense. I'm going to hand over the project to Sarah. She's going to run through this. It's a short presentation. Anna's going to jump in certain parts, and then we'll field questions and comments at the end, if you don't mind.
Sounds great.
Hey, good evening. As Jeff said, my name is Sarah White. I'm with the engineering department. Just do a quick little history of our stormwater fee that we currently have at the unified government. This stormwater fee was established in 2009 at $2, and it is a fee. It is not a tax. So it is a flat rate. The last rate increase was from $4 to $4.50, and that was effective January 1, 2012. So that's what we're currently at. We've not had an increase since then. The stormwater fee is based on, it's added to your BPU bill, and it is based on the electric account. So it's tied to an electric account and in the BPU bill. The revenue from the fee funds are storm sewer maintenance and repair, our environmental compliance that we have with our current consent decree, as well as our NPDES permit, and then our capital improvement projects. which are the first big capital improvement project was the Stony Point Stormwater Enhancement Project that's going on, phase 2 right now. So that's what where these funds came from. NPDES, National Pollution Elimination and Discharge.
So how clean our water is.
Yeah. Yeah, it's our permit that we have with KDHE for stormwater. This map just shows the lime green color is our current stormwater system, and in the areas that we do maintenance on. So I'll hand it over to Anna, and she's going to explain a little bit about the program.
Okay, so there's a couple different ways that stormwater costs can be recovered by a city or a county. It's not uncommon to recover those costs from the general fund or from taxes or from another source, but it's becoming more and more popular and more of an industry standard to have a dedicated stormwater user fee to fund the costs necessary for stormwater control. And so the UG already has a dedicated stormwater fee for that. So as Sarah mentioned, what this fee provides for is a dedicated funding source for the maintenance of the existing system, compliance with the EPA mandates, and for new capital projects that will be coming up in the future. And kind of one of the main reasons why it's becoming more and more popular to have a dedicated stormwater user fee is it provides a way to match the revenue that's being recovered with the services that are being provided. So therefore, we can tie the charge to the actual services being provided. So when we talk about a stormwater user fee program, there's a lot of different objectives that we're trying to meet with this program. The main two that I think everybody thinks about and what we've kind of mentioned already this evening is system integrity. That's making sure that we're taking care of the assets of the system, as well as the level of service. That's the operation and maintenance expense associated with keeping the system running and providing the services necessary. We also, though, need to take into account the customer experience, and this is where we're talking about engaging the customer, involving the customer into the decisions surrounding the utility, such as the user fee and what kind of services are being provided. So making sure that information is provided to your stakeholders and your customers so that they are informed regarding what the user fee is being used for. The financial market is also important to keep in mind if you plan on going out to the market for revenue bonds or some kind of funding source. It's important to make sure that we have a stable revenue source that will provide the support for getting loans or bonds in the market. Utility management and administration, again, we want to make sure that we have a stable source of revenue so that the utility can be managed properly, as well as having financial policies in place, such as a certain amount of an emergency reserve or an operating reserve, so that all of those policies are in place to make sure that the revenue that's being required is sufficient in order to fund the capital and the operating needs, as well as to maintain revenue stability. And then finally, elective officials and approving authorities, we want to make sure that we're providing the information necessary so that the officials can make the decisions that need to be made with regard to the fee and the utility. So why are we doing this analysis now? There's really kind of three big reasons. The first one is we're going to do an assessment of the program needs and look at the level of service being provided and see if it needs to be enhanced. And this kind of goes along with the Stormwater Master Plan that Sarah mentioned. This study is timed so that it will be wrapping up this first phase of it right when the Stormwater Master Plan will be done. And so then we anticipate we would integrate the findings of that Stormwater Master Plan into the final findings for this study, okay? The second one is to develop a 10-year financial plan. So as I mentioned, looking at the revenue stability for the utility and making sure that it's bringing in the amount of revenue necessary to provide the services needed. So what we're going to develop is a 10-year financial plan looking at how much revenue is currently being brought in with the current fee and how much revenue is needed. So looking at all the different revenue requirements for the system and making sure that our revenue matches our revenue requirements. And then the third thing that we're going to be doing is to be looking at the actual rate that's being charged and the rate structure. So as Sarah mentioned, it's currently $4.50 per month per electric account. industry best practices indicates that while some utilities do still have that flat fee per account, that's not that uncommon. More and more utilities are moving to the impervious area-based fee. And the reason for this is because it's a way to create a fair and equitable rate structure. And so if I can explain this to you using an example of water, because as Jeff mentioned, we also work with the BPU water. If you think about how you pay for your water, you pay based on the amount of water that you used. For stormwater, having a flat fee based on your electric account, there's absolutely no connection there between the stormwater runoff that comes off of your property and your electric account, the fact that you have an electric account. So by moving to this impervious area-based fee, we're doing the connection there between what causes the need for stormwater control and a stormwater utility to how we recover the fee. So in other words, customers that have more impervious area would pay more versus customers that have less impervious area. And so we're creating a fair and equitable rate structure. And Sarah's going to talk a little bit about what that means.
So during the Economic Development and Finance Committee meeting, Commissioner Murguia brought up a question of what is the target paying at 119th in Overland Park compared to our target out at Village West, and what that looks like. So and this is just some data that we got. So Overland Park, their current ESU, which is stands for Equivalent Stormwater Unit, they have it at $2 per ESU. So their rate study that they did came up with that number based on their revenue needs. So if that target, it's 119th and Blue Valley Parkway, approximately, they're paying approximately $534 a month. The target out at Village West, since we have the flat fee, they're paying $4.50 a month. So that's quite a bit of difference there. Then here's an example of the residential. So I took two neighborhoods that are near the target at the different locations, and a single-family residential near the target on 119th in Overland Park is paying $2 a month. And then here's a neighborhood near the target out in Piper, and they're paying the flat fee of $4.50 a month. So this is an example of something that's not quite fair that's going on. One of the things that a impervious-based rate structure lends itself to is the ability to have a credit program. So this would be something that we look into having. This wouldn't be until a later phase. But a credit program would allow the customer to have some ability to influence their fee. As you know, with our development process, anything over an acre is required to do some form of stormwater treatment, best management practice. And so this would be a way to encourage and help these businesses that are already doing this stuff get credit for the stormwater that they're capturing on site and keeping on site.
Can I stop you there?
Uh-huh.
So, such as if they were to develop with, like what you're showing in the lower corner, the
Pervious pavement.
pervious pavement and the pond area.
Oh, the wetland. Uh-huh.
It's cleans the water as it filters it. Is that what you mean?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. So there's different stormwater treatment that's required. I mean, that can help with facilitating the flows that would be coming off a now impervious site. And so with an impervious-based structure, you could implement these kind of credit programs. So Target, who built, would have maybe a detention basin, and then they would be able to maybe reduce their stormwater fee if they had an up and running detention basin. And then this also aligns with the UG's Green Infrastructure Initiative. So this is our project schedule. We're currently in phase 1, and that'll be going until March of 2018. And I'll have Anna kind of talk a little bit about the different phases.
Yeah, in phase 1, we're really targeting the 3 things that I mentioned earlier, looking at the program needs, developing that financial plan, and evaluating the impervious area-based rate. So we are going to go through the process of determining what the revenue requirements are and the amount of impervious area that we have available, and look at it on a customer basis and determine what that fee would look like if we did move to that. Another really important step in phase 1 is developing the Stormwater Advisory Committee. So this is going to be a group of, say, 12 to 15 individuals representing all different parts of the community. So representing the schools, health associations, faith-based programs, condominiums, multifamily, residential, industrial. We're going to try to find somebody from every area to be a part of this committee, and they'll serve in an advisory role so that we can present our ideas and our findings to them and get their feedback. So that will give us a good idea of how the public and the community will react to this change. So that's what we're doing in phase 1, is developing the advisory committee and coming up with a preliminary user fee if it was based on impervious area. At that point, it will be up for decision by the board to decide whether to move forward with phase 2, which would be actually creating and implementing that fee. Okay, and phase 2, we would do some of the program design and pre-billing, and then phase 3 is when we would actually work that into the billing system and start billing based on impervious area. We would anticipate if we got through phase 3, the stormwater user fee would be effective January of 2020.
Are there questions?
Yes.
Okay, so from my calculations, if you're collecting $450 per electric account, and we have about 65,000 electric accounts in Wyandotte County, so you're getting about $3.5 million a year. Do we know what the future budget needs will be annually for stormwater?
No, we have some work to do. We need to identify capital needs, ongoing operational needs. We don't know that yet until we get through that master plan and get through a little bit further into this process here.
Do we know what we've been spending annually for the last 5 years?
Well, our current budget, we have for stormwater maintenance, we have $1 million for stormwater maintenance. For example, for the Stony Point project, we had a budget of about $4 million for that. And so you can see that uses up, a year plus of revenue just for the one project.
Yeah, that's why I was wondering if we knew what the average was. And then the other thing, and I get this, I get asked a lot about this specific fee on the utility bill. I'm assuming there are a number of streets in our city that don't have storm drains. And I get asked because, I'll give you a prime example, the street that I live on does not have a storm drain, and the water just runs down the street, out into a field, and down into a creek. But yet, my neighbors have asked me why they have a fee for a storm drain that they don't have. So will one of two things happen? Will either that be looked at and eliminated from those residences that do not have storm drains, or will the funding be used to ultimately bring storm drains to those streets?
I would say yes to both of those. We are looking at, part of phase 1 is looking at the services being provided and to whom they're being provided to, so it would fall under that. But also as part of, I would assume it would come up in the stormwater master plan, is what areas are not receiving service now that maybe should be, and should that be included in the revenue requirements? Is enhancing the program to include everybody?
And part of our, and another item that I forgot to mention for the budget is also our MS4 compliance, our stormwater compliance through EPA, which right now we have about 400,000. That doesn't include all the other things that we're doing, so that number could be a lot higher than that. But so the stormwater fee that everyone pays does include, you know, that compliance, because any of the stormwater that's going to a creek or stream, lake, we are, you know, responsible for that as well. So it does, even though you might not have a structure or a pipe, there is some contributing factor to that.
Yeah, and I mostly bring this up for educational purposes. I think that, and it's not just the UG, the BPU has the same issues. I think our community college has the same issues about some of the fees and charges that we pass on to the residents, and not saying that any of them are wrong or overly. It's mostly just a matter of educating the public on what value they're getting for that cost of living in a city and the charges that go along with the, you know, the things that you get from being a city dweller. So I just think a lot of it is taking the time to make sure that we're educating our residents on why those fees are necessary and what the value is.
Thank you, I appreciate that. Commissioner Markley?
So I have been a longtime advocate of stormwater maintenance and construction of new stormwater, partially because my district is one of those that just doesn't have a lot of infrastructure in that area. And what I know from the couple of projects I've been able to sort of force through in my few years here is that it's ridiculously expensive to fix a stormwater issue that impacts maybe 10 houses, but it's a huge impact to those 10 houses. It just costs a lot of money. So I love this. I think this is a great idea. I know over the past few years we've started tracking in a more manageable way what already existing issues we are aware of. Obviously, recent flooding has given us a whole different perspective on what areas may have issues, and I'm hoping that we can start to aggregate that information as part of this study and figure out where are those priority areas and where can we begin putting this money. I'd love to get there before 2020, but I understand if that's as quick as we can do it, but I'm glad we're taking steps in that direction.
Thank you. Commissioner Philbrook?
Well, just being the structure of our topography and of our community, we have a whole lot of little streams and creeks and stuff that run through, and it's people don't realize how important it is that we actually pay attention. We do a lot of repair work around those and put new pipes and stuff in place and passovers. We work a lot around those just because of our community. We're not flat, you know, and thank God we're not like Houston, you know, but we do have a lot of responsibilities because of all those extra waterways that we have. And so I don't know how you guys do it, you know, keeping track of all those, but I want to thank you because I know there's been times that out of those little streams and stuff, occasionally we find some folks that are dumping stuff in our little streams, and we find those, and it may not be us that find them, maybe the state finds them, and then we have to go backwards and see who that bad person is or that group that's dumping a lot of stuff in that little stream. So, but we are responsible for that, and as a community as a whole, a population, everybody's responsible for making sure that we're not causing problems for others. So that's how I can understand that even though, you know, I may not have something right by my place, yeah, and I don't, and I'm right off of State Avenue, and I don't have one. It goes down into it runs down the street and goes down into the stream that runs under State. So, you know, I'm all for paying my 2 cents worth for that, but I know we really do need to restructure on how we're paying for it. Thank you.
I appreciate that comment. I just had a couple of comments kind of piggybacking off of Board BBU Board Member Bryant and also Commissioner Markley. So your comment about a large part of our work, I think, is education and helping our citizens and taxpayers and ratepayers understand what the fee is and why you pay it. For example, whether or not you have a storm drain in your neighborhood or not. I think that's a really important piece for us as elected officials to help you with, if not take the lead on. And it might be a clumsy analogy, but you know, within the taxes that I pay, I am paying for police and fire protection, whether or not I call the police ever, and gladly doing that. So that may or may not be a clumsy analogy, but it's the one that pops right to my head. And as you said, those stormwater fees are technically doing work all across the community, whether, again, there's a storm drain in the neighborhood or not. I mean, I live in an area where there's no sign of a storm drain anywhere near me. And then secondarily, with Commissioner Markley's comments, I want to make sure I'm understanding that our stormwater master plan process hopefully is going to help us get to those answers of, we know where the storm drains are not. Hopefully the master planning process is going to help us not only with the fee structure, but also the plan moving forward as to prioritizing where the next place for them should be.
Yes, that's
Am I
exactly
right about
right. There'll be a scoring process for every project that's objective based on a number of different factors.
Commissioner Johnson. I'm done.
I was just thinking about what Commissioner Fieldbrook was talking about. I've got family, and some of us also have family down in Houston. And when you see situations going on as they are occurring right now, it brings situations like this into clearer view. I'm just curious, it seems to me that we would be unlikely to receive the kind of rain that they are receiving down there, but what would it take for us to find ourselves in a similar type situation? While I know flooding is a reality in some of our districts right now, and it could get a lot worse. Are we ready for something like that, or is that just such an unlikely occurrence given our topography and our location within the country?
Yeah, not quite sure how to answer that one. It's highly, it's just almost impossible to prepare for something like that. And using an example from our past, I think it would be the 1993 flood, right? That would be the last event here in this community that was that significant. That would be, that happens, well, the one before that was 1950, right? Right. 51. So it's possible. It's possible. It's hard to prepare for something like that, but I think, based on what I've seen since I've been here, UG's in good shape. Our preparations are good.
I want to talk about the math a little bit on the impervious area fee. I get caught up in those numbers. When you talk about the $2 analysis that you have in Johnson County, can you kind of walk me through how you get to like a $534 a month per month fee? I mean, what numbers are you using to get to that number?
It should be 663,000 square feet times $2 divided by 12.
Okay. I figured it was easy, but I was sitting here tinkering and I couldn't get that number to save my life. So, okay. So we're talking about a similar type equation. It's at least that's what we're going to be analyzing, is a similar type of equation. Whether it's $2 or some other number, we don't know. But that's
right.
What we're looking at. Then the next slide was showing that in the residential, so you're saying that some of them will remain on a flat fee basis, or the residential remain on a flat fee basis, or no?
Well, no, this is just an example that, we're paying flat, everyone pays flat fee. In Overland Park, a single family residential is at $2 because
flat fee.
Well, I think it's based on, it's still that ESU, that equation, but
Paved your whole front yard, would it be different?
it could bump you up, I think. And so some of the options are, there's some different alternatives. One would be just strictly that equation using percent impervious.
Right.
That would be very, that'd be kind of difficult. We're going to look at that, but that'd be difficult for, each house. You'd be a little different. What a lot of people do is a tiered rate structure. So you'd have your single family residential 0 to 500 square feet would be one, 500 to 1,000, and then maybe if you put a large addition onto your house,
Right.
would that bump you up? Maybe, but you're not going to have those, meticulous calculations for each house. You'd fit into a tiered.
So in other words, if you were figuring out how much impervious area there is, like for instance, out at our big complexes out just west of the Legends, that would be totally different than just suburbia, so to speak.
And from what Anna and her colleagues have said, the condos, apartment buildings can get a little tricky because it's based on how they divide up their electric accounts and their bills. But we have been meeting, or we have met with BPU, and we'll continue to meet with them on how they do their billing structure.
Thank you.
Any more questions on this topic? We will look forward to hearing more from you as you move through that process. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for your time.
That was an information-only item, and that was a lot of good information. And next, we have item 7, and we have legal coming forward. We have a resolution authorizing a survey of lands for the BPU Water Distribution Improvement Project for Muncie. Ryan.
Good afternoon. Ryan Hagen with the Legal Department. With me is Durward Johnson from BPU Water. This is a simple resolution survey which for any condemnation action that might be required for the site improvement project at the South Bethany and Muncie. Basically, my understanding of the project is that it will involve the building of a storage building and a new entrance site and a guardhouse. If you have any more specific questions regarding the project, again, I have Mr. Johnson here with me.
Move to approve.
All right, we have a motion and a second for approval of this item. Roll call.
Roll call, Bryant.
Aye.
Philbrook. Aye. Markley.
Aye.
Kane. Aye. Johnson.
Aye.
Bynum.
Aye, and that motion carries, and we thank you very much for waiting patiently for your turn. We do have one last item, and this was the pink sheet that was added to your agenda. We have Laura Cromwell, and it is a request to apply for and accept the Edward Byrne Memorial Justice Assistance Grant. So that's a very positive way of thinking. Welcome.
Hi. I'm actually Pamela Waldeck. I'm an assistant chief with the Kansas City, Kansas Police Department. This is Captain Shoemaker, the commander of our Internal Affairs Unit. Laura couldn't be here tonight. I believe she's maybe having a baby.
Oh my goodness.
So I'm filling in for her. We are seeking approval to apply for the Justice Assistance Grant. And this grant we hope to use for to replace antiquated software within our internal affairs system and our employee early tracking system, which tracks pursuits, use of force, and discipline within the that the officers are involved in. And currently the software that we're using is about 15 years old. We're not able to update that software. And this system that we're trying to go with, IA Pro, which is a sole source provider, is best practices, and it's also in line with CLIA. And we are asking for about $55,000 on the grant, and then the other portion of that grant, we're asking for $50,000 to send commanders to the Senior Management Institute for Police, which is a school that lasts about 20 days, and we would like to be able to send the commanders to that. It's held on the Boston University campus, and it costs about $10,000 all-inclusive to send each commander.
Move for approval.
Second.
Motion and a second. We have discussion. Commissioner Philbrook.
So At the risk of asking a question that some of us may be assuming, this has all been looked at, and it integrates well with the rest of our information and our IT stuff that we're doing for the overall information network now being taken care of for our city. So you understand what I'm saying? I mean, it's kind of convoluted comment, but it's.
Yes. So it will be a standalone system, but it will talk to our CAD system that the new CAD system that we're currently integrating. And this will take some of the reports that actually aren't developed. They're not state mandated reports, but our department reports. We'll be able to do them in this software. And then it will there's two sides to this software. It will talk to both sides, and then it will be able to be uploaded into New World.
Thank you very much.
I have one quick question, and then we'll take our vote. Is there, in this grant that I know RPD has applied for many times through this particular Justice Assistance Grant, are there times when they give you less than what you asked for, or is it kind of an all or none? And I guess the second part of that is, if they give us less than what we need, can we still do something?
I believe that we're told how much we can apply for on the front end. So we were given a number of $106,000 and told that we're eligible for that amount, and we're applying for about $105,500. So we try to maximize. That's how we pick the projects, is so we could maximize the amount we're being allotted. So that kind of answers your question.
Yes, do you have experience receiving less than what you asked for ever?
Not in this specific grant. I've seen it in other grants, but
Not this one.
specific grant, no.
Thank you. And are there anything else?
We should be able to complete both of these projects. I do know that if something comes up, we can amend these grants once they're awarded. So what we could do is if we needed more money to implement the software program, we could send less people to the training and move that money over to the software side.
Okay.
So I think we could work it out that way.
Thank you very much. All right, roll call, please.
Roll call, Bryant.
Aye.
Philbrook.
Aye.
Markley.
Aye.
Kane. Johnson. Bynum.
Aye, and that motion carries, and we thank you very much.
Thank you.
That concludes this meeting, and we are appreciative of your attendance, and we are also adjourned. And thank you, sir.
Oh, thank you.
We'll see you soon. Shall we move into administration, or do we need a minute to reset? 2 minutes.
forge ahead with the Administration and Human Services Standing Committee. We want to welcome everyone to this meeting. Public comment is welcome on standing committee items. Anyone wishing to speak on any item on the standing committee agenda may do so when the item is up for discussion. You will have up to 3 minutes to state your comments. Everyone, please use your microphones, and would the clerk please call roll?
Roll call. Philbrook.
Here.
Johnson.
Here.
Kane. Bynum.
Here.
Markley.
Here. Next, we have the minutes from our May 23rd and June 26th meetings.
Second.
We have a motion and second. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Those minutes have been approved. We have no blue sheets or pink sheets on this agenda, so we'll just move straight to item number 1. We have 2 items on our agenda tonight, and the first is a request to implement a new pilot service for enhanced paratransit. I'll ask Justice Welker to present this item. Welcome.
Thank you very much for having me this evening, and thank you for the opportunity. I'm here tonight seeking approval to implement a new pilot service that's designed to provide a new mobility option for those in need. So we plan to brand this service as Enhanced Paratransit. We offer 2 paratransit services currently. We do one for persons with disabilities. We also have a paratransit service for senior citizens who are 65 or older. The definition of paratransit is a service that supplements a larger public transit system. So paratransit doesn't have a fixed time point. It's not on a fixed route. It's a demand response service where a person makes a reservation. We pick them up and take them to their destination. So these are folks who don't have access to private transportation, don't have a vehicle, don't have reasonable access to the fixed route transportation, and kind of fall through the cracks with the other services we provide. So what we anticipate is providing trips for able-bodied people, 16 to 64. We're going to commingle this into our existing service, so it's not additional service. It'll be incorporated into what we provide now. The cost of these trips will be determined by the length of the trip, and I'll show you a fare schedule here at the end. And the service we're providing, since it's public transportation, would be significantly less than a traditional ride-hailing service, such as an Uber or Lyft or something like that. We're probably looking at a 55 to 65% cost savings over those traditional ride-hailing services. Now, another thing we're targeting on this service would be people who live outside of an area. So best practice says that a person will walk a quarter of a mile to a bus stop to catch a bus. So there's a first mile, last mile problem for people wanting to utilize the bus service that lives outside of that range. And I'll show you a slide. I'll actually skip to it right now.
Could you address how many blocks a quarter of a mile would be?
Depends on the city itself, but I would say it's probably in the neighborhood of 8 to 10 blocks.
Okay, just wanted, because most of us don't,
Right.
think in quarter of a mile walking.
Yeah. Well, I think it depends on, you know, your scale. A quarter mile may seem small to some folks and may be, you know, unbearable to others. But so here's a map of our current routes within our jurisdiction. The bubbles around those routes are a quarter mile buffer around the transit stops themselves. So you can see we did the math, and about 50% of our residents have access to those routes since they live within a quarter of a mile. So that leaves 50% who don't have access to those fixed routes. So these are the folks that, you know, we're targeting for this service. So we want to target folks that want to ride that fixed route but live beyond that quarter of a mile and don't have access to that fixed route. So we're gonna incorporate those folks. We're gonna say if you subscribe to this service, we'll take you to the closest transit center or closest transfer hub. We'll put you on that fixed route service. In turn, paying the fare to get to that transit hub will give you a transfer so you can ride on that service. The transfers are good for 2 hours. It'll get you around wherever you need to go within that 2-hour time frame. In return, we pick you up to the end of the day. We'll accept that transfer and get you back home to your where you originated from. The pilot service projected at minimum to be a budget neutral initiative, as the passenger fares, the fare structure will offset any additional costs. We don't anticipate a huge percentage of people utilizing this service, but those folks that do use this service will be those that are in need of the service. They don't have any other options. When we eliminated the 105 route at the beginning of this year, we did public comment, public meetings, and most of the folks that came, we were able to find an alternative, put them on some other service, or get them, you know, on a fixed route close and get them to their destination. There were a handful of those folks that we just could not, you know, we couldn't come up with anything for. So this service similar to this would provide a mobility option for those folks. And again, initial ridership projections are minimal. We anticipate trying the service for 6 months, reevaluating it, see if the fare structure, meets the needs of those who want the service, see what the ridership looks like, see if, we overextended ourselves, if we couldn't do it within the services we provide now. But all indications are we'll be able to incorporate that into our existing service. This is kind of hard to see. It was in your packet, but this is kind of a matrix of the paratransit services we provide. Gives the difference between the ADA paratransit for the people with disabilities, the senior paratransit, and also this new enhanced paratransit.
So I saw in there that you had a 2-hour window. Do you want to speak to that? There's a 2-hour length that's work.
Oh, that's for the transfer itself, yeah. So the transfer ticket to ride the public transportation system is good for 2 hours. After those 2 hours, if you're still on the system, you can get virtually anywhere in the metro in less than 2 hours. But so a person who rides a fixed route transit, they pay a base fare of $1.50. In turn, they get a transfer ticket to transfer to additional routes to get to their destination. So that's where that 2-hour time frame comes into play.
I guess, so here's what I'm asking is so if I want to go someplace, you get me to, let's say, 47th and State, and I get on that, and I need to go to my doctor's office, which is downtown, over town. Okay, I get there. Well, we all know that sometimes we don't get in exactly when we think we should into that office, and we have to sit there and wait.
Sure.
Well, if things fall outside of that 2-hour.
Right. Yeah, you'd have to pay an additional base fare, $1.50 to get back on that fixed.
So it'd just be $1.50 to get back on if you fall
They'd give you a
outside of
transfer
that.
ticket, and then we'd accept that transfer ticket to take you back to your residence.
Just as long as, okay.
Yeah.
Gotcha, thank you.
So here's the fare schedule that we look to adopt. This is the Ride KC Freedom fare schedule. So there's already other services within the region utilizing this same fare schedule. It's been published. We figured it'd be easy just to adopt this schedule since it's already out there. And again, the pilot project, we'd reevaluate this at the end of the 6 months, see if we need to make some changes along the way. I showed you the quarter-mile buffer zone. Again, those are quarter miles around the existing bus stops on the fixed route system people have access to. And this map, this was staggering to me. So this is a snapshot of our last 12 months of paratransit service. So this map kind of shows the magnitude and reach of our current paratransit programs. So you're looking at 1,424 unique destinations that we've taken folks to within the county, and there's over 34,000 passenger trips from those destinations. So again, we're incorporating this enhanced paratransit into our current system. So this kind of shows you the reach we have within the county. There's not many areas that we don't provide service to from a paratransit perspective. Yep, that's basically August 2016 to present day.
Commissioner Kane.
Could you say that number again?
34,000 trips.
And what's Johnson County do?
Johnson County really doesn't have paratransit per se. They don't have, since they don't operate true full-day fixed route service, they don't have to incorporate paratransit service. Now, they do special edition service, but they don't do all day for.
And yet they get more money from the state than we do. Thank you.
Commissioner Philbrook.
So when you were talking about distances, was that total distance to and from the location or just to it? With your breakdown on charges?
Those are per each one-way trip. So that would get you there and you'd have to pay the same fare to get back.
So if if I have to go 5 miles out, let's say, that base fare would be, is it round trip, so it's 10 miles,
It'd be $10 round trip for a
This is a
10.
round trip thing, thank you.
Commissioner Bynum.
Just a marketing question, Justice, are we not calling this Ride KC Freedom?
It'll be a tier within Ride KC Freedom.
Okay, so we will brand it
Correct.
along with the rest of the regional transit system?
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, we're in the process. Our systems, our paratransit systems used to be called Dial-A-Ride. We're in the process of rebranding those to Ride KC Freedom, and there are different tiers of Ride KC Freedom. There's an application-based paratransit service now that's Ride KC Freedom on demand. So this will just be another tier within Ride KC Freedom.
Well, I'm going to look forward to what you have to share in 6 months after you do your kickoff trial period.
It'll be interesting. And again, I don't anticipate a windfall of usage and revenue coming in from the service, but I think those people that we do reach will be those who actually need this service.
Any other questions from the?
Just wanted to state that I want to thank Justice for his innovative and I believe creative, which is the next level of innovation, thinking on this, because I have certainly not seen a municipality looking to do this kind of service. So I just want to thank him for his ideas and efforts and willingness to bring those forward and experiment with something that may have large benefits to those that need it in our community. So,
Agreed. Any comments from the public? There are a few people out there. Hearing none, I'll entertain a motion from the committee.
Oh, so moved.
Second.
Roll call on the motion.
Roll call. Philbrook.
Aye.
Johnson.
Aye.
Kane. Bynum.
Aye.
Markley.
Thank you, Justice. Item 2 is for discussion only regarding the current Airbnb situation in KCK, and Rob Richardson is here to visit with us.
Who knew?
Welcome, Rob.
Good evening. So this is an interesting issue for us, this, what we term short-term rentals, but you may know them by Airbnb, VRBO, or HomeAway. These are typically defined as properties that are rented for overnight stays from 1 to 29 nights. It's from as little as, hey, you can sleep on my couch, to you can have my whole house or my whole apartment unit. It could be the owner's primary residence or an investment property. And one other thing that's unique about these is they pay sale and hotel room taxes. So it's not like a rental property where somebody rents it for 18 months because you don't pay sales taxes or hotel room taxes on those. So these are distinguished in that way from what you would consider a regular rental property. I mean, I've used this service in other cities. I don't know if anyone else has, but it's kind of a neat service, and it's nice when you go out of town to, you don't have to stay in a hotel, and they're cheaper than staying in a hotel a lot of times, and you get to meet cool people sometimes. So, it's interesting. This is a screenshot when you put Kansas City, Kansas into the search engine. So you can see there's several different homes and things for rent there, different prices per night, depending on what services they're offering. We have a private room and we have whole houses. I don't know if it's true, but I heard somebody on Strawberry Hill may have rented their house for like $1,000 for the solar eclipse weekend. I don't know if that's true or not, but lots of people were, places to stay in Kansas City area were very much in demand. I bring this to you because we have 2 bed and breakfast special use permits now. There's one on your agenda for Thursday evening, so there might be 3. But we have 45 properties on Airbnb. That's significantly more than we had when we looked last year when we looked at this issue. And so I thought, given the increase in the sharing economy and the increase that we've seen here, it was time to talk about this. It became an issue quite a lot faster than I thought it would have been. It might be even higher than that on race weekends, obviously, when our demand for housing and things increases, or other special event times. We do have 2 current complaints on Airbnb facilities in the community. And so I haven't acted on those complaints yet because I wanted to do this before and talk to you all before we move forward. So talking about how big the issue is, we have 29 that are in ag through R2 districts. So those are our lower density residential districts, 8 in what you would consider more multifamily districts, and 7 in a commercial or T&D zone. I believe the one that's in a T&D zone is along 6th Street, Strawberry Hill, where that was rezoned to T&D a year or 2 ago. But you can see here, R1, R1B are definitely the biggest. The R5 are probably apartment units being rented, maybe around KU Med or something like that. There's several benefits of this and also some concerns. Obviously, it's a source of income for folks that do this. It's an affordable option for our visitors. It does provide additional revenue to the city because we do collect taxes from these. It could help us with blight reduction and occupying some places that weren't previously occupied. And obviously, there's the sharing economy part of this. We do have a long list of concerns as well, from parking to noise, other potential nuisances. You might have read an article in the Star a week or two ago about somebody that rented out an apartment, and basically it was a cover charge party in somebody's nice apartment building, and it was loud and rowdy, and everything you can imagine from a crazy party in the apartment next door. We have some neighborhood character issues in some places potentially. It kind of commercializes potentially some of the neighborhoods. Other cities have had apartment buildings converted basically to a hotel because they Airbnb the whole apartment facility, which might reduce our full-time residents. Tax collection is an issue. Airbnb does have an agreement with the state of Kansas, but we're still kind of investigating how much of that we actually get. And there is an equity issue with those that invest in hotel properties in the community to provide those services. As far as our code goes, right now, these short-term rentals, obviously Airbnb calls themselves a bed and breakfast, but that's kind of the service that they provide. We have two areas where we have specific special use permit requirements. If you have a home occupation where customers visit your site, or if you have a commercial use where the owner does not live on the subject property, you would need a special use permit for temporary use of land for commercial purposes. And I talk about this, and I mentioned the distinction before because these pay sales taxes. So that really distinguishes why they would go into the special use permit category as opposed to maybe our general rental license program. Obviously, most of these properties don't have either a business license or a special use permit and are currently under the code in illegal use. Yes?
So then what is our remedy on that, since they are?
Well, that's part of the discussion we'll get to.
We have no remedy right now, is it?
Well, we do. I mean, we have, zoning enforcement action that we can take, and we'll talk about if that's our path or not as well.
And as we go forward, I think part of this then is your intent to find a new way to get through all of this so it's more organized and less special use permit directive?
Well,
okay.
So the legal issues speak to some of the points that you're making. Some courts have required specific language in comprehensive short-term rental ordinances. They weren't organized for special use permits the way we are. I think we're actually in a good position there. The courts have held the zoning codes or definitions of bed and breakfast and hotels don't directly apply to this new type of use, which I don't really understand because bed and breakfast has been using the internet for years and years and years now. But utilizing a home occupation method of regulation appears maybe to be a better way to do that for us currently while we don't have, we're getting ready to, sometime in the next month we'll be analyzing the responses to our RFP to rewrite the zoning code. But we don't have that right now. So we actually have, kind of our language says, well, if you have visitors come to your home and you're collecting fees for that service, then you have a home occupation that needs a special use permit. Or if you don't live there and you have people coming to that site for commercial purposes, and obviously if you're collecting sales tax, it's commercial operation, they fit in those categories. As far as tax implications go, the Kansas Department of Revenue has reached an agreement with Airbnb to collect the taxes. The state is remitting taxes back to us, but we aren't sure if we're receiving all of those taxes, our local sales tax and our local room tax, or we're talking with them to kind of figure out how that is tracked and how we can be sure that we get all of the taxes that we're due. Some cities, I think Leavenworth has their own agreement with Airbnb and they do theirs on their own. So is that correct, Kathleen? Kathleen was telling me about this because there's several of us working on the issue, and it's kind of all there's a lot going on in a lot of cities right now related to this.
Yeah, so I had the chance to speak with the assistant city manager in Leavenworth, and what I learned was that they actually went forward and got, through home rule, the ability to self-administer their transient guest tax altogether, and then they entered into an agreement directly with Airbnb, and they've been doing this now for about a year or two, and they've really seen significant improvements on their revenue tax collection for transient guest tax. So anyway, yeah.
Thank you. So what are some of the other local cities doing? There's a description here of the Roland Park ordinance. They define short-term rentals. They require a rental permit. They limit them to your primary residence, so they don't let you do that as a commercial, buy a house and turn it into a hotel, basically. You know, the owner has to be there most of the year. You know, it accounts for some vacation time, but they have to provide courtesy notices to their neighbors, which is interesting. It's not a neighbor veto, but it's a notice to your neighbors so they understand. And they need to include their city permit on all their marketing materials. Kansas City, Missouri is working on this issue. And you know, this had to be prepared a couple of weeks ago. They've had another public hearing since then, so this information is outdated. But they're still working through a similar issue, but they're focusing on what neighborhoods can do this, some can, some can't. That raised a lot of issues in their last public hearing. And that was kind of described in the Star article as well. But they would limit them to low-intensity single-family neighborhoods. So you wouldn't have them in apartments, you wouldn't have them in other higher density districts. Lawrence is currently pursuing complaint-based enforcement on this, and they're exploring some of their options related to short-term rentals. They have a report there, the website that you can read, but as we move forward in this, the list at the bottom here is some of the common things and potential solutions identified by the City of Lawrence. But our current intent is to notify these folks if they need a special use permit. We probably won't have a new zoning code adopted for at least a year, and I worry about how many more might get out there and how much bigger the problem would be. Some folks may say, well, I'm not making any money on this anyway. I'm not going to do the process and just self-eliminate. I would imagine there would be some of those that would be that way. But we will, during the zoning code rewrite process, address this and see if there's a better way, and we will discuss that in the public meetings and things like that. So we'll have a more of a public input process into that as we move forward. But the tools, you know, we have zoning tools, obviously. You could geographically limit where these could be. Obviously, permitting and registration can become important. Residency requirements. Inspections, I think, are very important. We have guests coming into the city that expect a level of safety in the places that they're going to be renting. Occupant limits, for example, the case in Kansas City, Missouri, where you had 50 people in an apartment making a lot of noise and kind of trash in the hallways and the elevators and the parking lot is not a good thing. How many days a year you can do this, and notification either through the zoning process or some type of good neighbor brochure I think would be important, so your neighbors would know and expect to see folks and understand that there would be additional folks in the neighborhood. And it's an interesting dilemma. I mean, myself, the kids have all gone back to college now. There's 3 empty bedrooms, and it might be interesting to have some people come in to chat on a Friday or Saturday evening and have breakfast with them and tell them where the good places in Kansas City to go. But I think it's important that we discuss this amongst the commission about the way we move forward and how we plan to handle this. But for right now, we would notify these folks that they would need a special use permit under the current code, and then address the issue in the zoning code update.
So I think that is the right solution, for now. At least that's my personal opinion, not necessarily the opinion of anyone else here. My question is, can we, as we're notifying these people that currently they have to have a special use permit, can we make some indication that there'll be consideration as we do this zoning code rewrite, so that they might think, I'm not going to apply for a special use permit now because it's not that critical to me, but I'm going to pay attention to what's going on here as the UG rewrites their code, and maybe when we have this new provision, I go back to, you know, hosting my Airbnb room based on the new regulation. I just want to make sure people know that that's out there.
Right. We will craft a letter that describes what we're doing now and what the process will be in the future, as we get that notice out to them. And we'll give them time. You know, I don't expect them to file by the end of the month, but I would expect to see them, you know, at least get in the process over the next 60 days. And if they're not in that process, then we would have a different letter we might send to them at the end of that period.
Yeah, and I was going to say that giving them some time is important too, because they may have people lined up
Right.
going out for some amount of time that they're going to have to either figure out, do I apply for this permit? Do I cancel? Does it fall before you're going to crack down on them and they have the ability to go ahead and have that one more guest? So,
Right. And I think that, you know, if they have reservations that are already made and they take their site down and they fulfill those reservation obligations, I mean, typically, even in code enforcement actions, if it's a zoning related issue, we allow them to pursue the zoning process before we put them through code court.
Commissioner Bynum?
I have a question, Rob, for you in terms of you have used this in other cities. So when you reserve an Airbnb in another city, do you, as the renter, sign something anywhere that says, I'm going to abide by all the laws of your city? I mean, I'm looking for accountability for a bad act.
I haven't made the reservation. I haven't been the reservation maker in our family, so I'm not sure what you sign in terms and conditions. And quite frankly, I wouldn't be worried about that, so I would just click through that and check their money and go on.
Okay.
Somebody
The
else.
answer is they've added some new layers, at least on Airbnb. I can't speak to the other services, but they've added where you actually have to have an ID confirmation. My most recent travel to Seattle, I stayed in a lower level of someone's home in the city of Seattle proper, and I was required to put my ID down and have them, let them take a photo of it through my cell phone and send it on. So there are things being done that are enhancing the service. I can't say that just because they got my mugshot off my driver's license, that somehow indicates I'm a good person, but.
Or that it was a real ID.
It was a real ID, yes, but that is what they're doing and how they're handling it. In fact, this particular ID was the one with my old last name and it had been cut off in the corner, so, but it was accepted.
Commissioner Johnson?
Thank you. So these,
The answer to that. Actually, I just wanted to point out, as a host, you agree that you are abiding by all the laws in your local state and community. So the current laws.
So if you're the host, you're going to be responsible for any bad acting on the part of your guests.
Well, so whatever local laws, like the laws he's pointed out we have currently, if the 40-plus hosts that we have, discussed here, they all agreed that they're abiding by the current laws we have in place, which I don't think they probably are. So do you understand what I mean by that? That's what I mean by that. Yeah.
But, there's, we focus on some of the negatives. There's a lot of positive things to it too. When, we were in Phoenix, we were kind of it was an old apartment complex that had been turned to condos and all remodeled. And, so we're renting a condo that was that all 5 of us could stay in. And, I don't know if anybody there knew what was going on, but, they had a lemon tree out front that was full of lemons. It was, kind of nice. They had fresh lemons in our iced tea.
Back to Commissioner Johnson.
thank you. So the 45 properties that we are currently on Airbnb, they are collecting the state and local taxes right now.
Airbnb has an agreement with the state of Kansas to collect those. But like I said, we're still working with the state and trying to track down that we are getting both our local hotel tax and our local sales tax. And the state portion of that is not as significant as our part is.
But I guess what I'm wanting to make sure of is that they are currently collecting them on all 45 of those properties.
That is my understanding, that the state is collecting that based on the agreement with Airbnb.
So my research manager, Mike Grimm, and I have been monitoring that. There's a 3-month delay just in receiving property tax distributions based from the point of sale to when we get them cash. And plus that went into effect in January or February. So you have to count back March, April, May. We've only gotten a few, it's kind of intermittent. We're still looking for more information, like you said.
But the money doesn't come in with, we had 17 room nights and we collected this much tax for it, so we could kind of make that calculation.
Other comments or questions? Comments or questions from the public? You have 3 minutes. Please give your name and your city of residence and use the microphone.
Okay, it's green now, okay. Philip Henderson, Kansas City, Kansas. I'm actually the licensed administrator with the city here. And I just have one comment that I'd like to make in support of Mr. Richardson's efforts here that speak to the character and complaints. Our office actually receives a great number of complaints, and those I have forwarded on to Rob over periods of time. One of those, unfortunately, the complaints come in after the fact. And in speaking to the character and complaints, there's not much that can be done after the fact because there's no real tracking on any of these situations. And one of them last year, and actually I believe it is one of the two that's out there at Canaan, we had received complaint during race weekend last year that one of them, and again, it's unconfirmed because there was no opportunity for police department to do any kind of investigation at the time, but that it was being used for either drug activity and or as a prostitution setup during race week. One of the two that was out at listed at Canaan. That was one of the complaints we received last year, that one of those two locations was being used for that type. And again, because there was no opportunity, it was after the fact, police department had no opportunity to do county investigation at that time.
Well, and it's relatively easy to see how a resident could think something, maybe they see people going in and out that are not their normal neighbors, and they're like, even if they were just staying there and it wasn't anything that dire, you could see where people in a neighborhood might say, there's 5 people going in and out of this house. They're people I've never seen before. What kind of business are they doing?
I have to warn my neighbors when my 9 brothers and sisters show up, so they don't think anything is really strange going on. And it's a crowd of 80.
All right, any other follow-up discussion? This is an item for information only, for discussion only, although I think if we want to give Rob direction other than what he has presented as his plan moving forward, now will be the time to do it. Otherwise, he's going to forge ahead as noted.
Forge ahead.
All right. Thank you, Rob.
Thank you.
That does conclude our meeting. Thank you for your attendance, and we are adjourned.